As my grade 13 geography teacher used to say, it always pays to know a little bit of geography. We see here that the Philistines are camped between the towns of Soko and Azekah. Now, in order to understand the significance of that, Azekah is 12 miles in from the coast, and the coastal plain is where the Philistines live. 12 miles past Azekah, going inland, is Bethlehem, almost the central core of Israel. And that valley, the Valley of Elah, was the main access route that the Philistines always tried to use to get into Israel to capture it. And it was the same route that Nebuchadnezzar and virtually every other invader tried to use. It was a nice, good valley, and it was an easy one to get to. And it went if they followed the valley, they got to exactly where they wanted to go. And so the Philistines are there, and they're trying to entice Israel to do something that would have been really stupid for most people to do. But they had a technology, the Philistines did, that Israel did not. The Philistines had iron swords. They had iron spears, iron-tipped spears. And Israel had, at the very best, if they had any kind of sword at all, they had small brass swords, which would have been predominantly copper, and a good iron sword could have cut those in half. Now, I can't quite pronounce the Hebrew name, but the name for Goliath, not Goliath, but the word that's used to describe him in Hebrew means the man in the middle. And it was very common in the time of Goliath and before and after for there to be a champion come out, a professional soldier, from each side, and the professionals would do the battle rather than all the amateurs that filled the ranks. And whoever won, that side was considered the winner. And therefore they would, you'd have a battle, and if your side won, then the other guys were basically paid tribute to you. You took over. It was a different way of fighting than what we use now, for sure. And so Goliath of Gath, 6 cubits in a span, 9'6", something like that, is the guy that the Philistines have as their hero, their champion. And theoretically, he has all this massive armor. He's got things to cover his shins. He's got chain mail. He's scale mail. He's got the sword bearer helmet on his head, all these sorts of things. We have no idea how tall he was. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody's ever found a skeleton that tall. There are some interesting stories about people that are that tall. You can look on the internet, look under giants, and you'll come up with some very interesting things, I'm sure. But we simply, pure, honest, absolute fact, haven't got a clue. I have 2 sons who are 6'6" and 6'5". I'm 6'1½", and I feel like a shrimp beside them. And I'm quite sure that David would have felt quite small. In any event, when Goliath came out and challenged Israel to send a man out, they were all afraid, and they would have been all afraid. This was a professional soldier. None of them were professional soldiers. None of them had iron swords. None of them would have been able to carry the spear. If they had gone and tried to attack him the way he normally fought, they would have been outclassed. And that was what Saul tried to do when David said, who is this uncircumcised dog sort of thing? Who does he think he is, challenging the God of Israel? David had the faith to challenge, and his brothers were angry because it made them look like they were wimps because they did not go out and actually challenge the guy. And there's their little brother who's ready to take him on. And somebody takes David to meet Saul, And this is another interesting thing of where the things are changed. But Saul is impressed with him, starts to put on his armor. Saul's armor on top of David. David says, I can't fight with this stuff. This is too heavy. And so David goes and gets 5 smooth stones and sling. Now you got to understand, he did not get stones the size of marbles. And he knew how to use the sling. In a previous chapter, it talked about guys that could use a sling and could throw rocks at a hair's breadth. And what that means is that they were so accurate with that if you had put a hair up on something and they could see it, they could put the stone right across the middle of that hair at whatever distance they were good at. And you can be good at different distances. And so David, the rocks were probably half, if you made a fist, the rock would be maybe half to a third the size of your fist. Now if you got a huge hand, maybe smaller, but something like that. And it would have been smooth because that would have seen to it that it flew true. And what he did with it was he challenged Goliath. Goliath just looked down at David like David was some sort of puny idiot. And David said, the God of Israel will deliver you into my hands, so that the world will know that there is a God in Israel. Not because David's such a great hotshot, not because David's such a magnificent person, not because Israel has a wonderful army, but so that the world will know that there is God in Israel. That's when you do things, that's the important reason to do it, so that people know there is a God. And he throws the stone. I've seen videos that purport to see, well, this big guy had this vision problems and all the rest of it. I just take it the way it is. The Heavenly Father is quite capable of doing things the way he says he will do them, and sometimes people get these things perfectly right. And unless we hear differently from Heavenly Father, I'm willing to take this pretty much the way it is. I'm quite sure if it's different, we'll find out in due course. But what we know is a professional soldier who's pretty good size was taken on by a shepherd boy whose only weapon was a sling and the power of belief in God. The shepherd boy won. And then he cut off Goliath's head. Goliath fell, either dead or unconscious. And then David smote off his head with Goliath's own sword. And then the people who saw that Goliath was dead, the Philistines, they started running, and then they got chased by the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and they chased them all the way down towards the coast to the cities of the Philistines. And then they came back, and it says they spoiled their tents. What it meant was, I had one person one time who thought, well, why would they ruin all the tents? Spoiled the tents meant went through the tents and took the things of value. So that was what that meant. Now the reason they had to fight in the Valley of Elah is very simple. That was the primary way through to the children of Israel's heartland. And that was the way they had to block that. If they didn't block that, if they didn't win, they were in really big trouble. So that's the story. As far as we know, the facts of David and Goliath.